For years, Joe Rogan represented something different. He wasn't polished, he wasn't scripted, he wasn't controlled by corporate media. He felt like the guy sitting next to you at a bar, asking questions everybody else was too afraid to ask. That was the appeal. Whether he was talking to scientists, conspiracy theorists, comedians, fighters, hunters, billionaires, or complete weirdos, it always felt authentic. And that authenticity is exactly why millions of people trusted him. But something changed. Slowly, over time, the Joe Rogan Experience transformed from a raw, curiosity-driven podcast into something that many longtime fans barely recognize anymore. And the crazy part is, this didn't happen overnight. There were specific moments, specific decisions, and the specific relationships that completely altered the trajectory of Joe Rogan's career and public image. Today, we're going to break down the major turning points that many people believe caused Joe Rogan to become the exact thing he used to criticize. Because the guy who once warned everyone about corporate media, billionaire influence, censorship, government narratives, and elite manipulation now spends hours defending billionaires, repeating established talking points, trusting AI blindly, and platforming powerful people without asking the hard questions his audience expects. And whether you love Joe Rogan or hate him, you can't deny that something just feels different now. So today we're going to be diving into the Spotify deal, the move to Austin, the comedy downfall, the political transformation, his relationship with billionaires, the AI obsession, and why millions of viewers have slowly started tuning out.
I'm friends now, this is a bizarre thing to say, with multiple billionaires.
Yeah.
I know multiple guys that are billionaires, and they're very nice people. Well, Elon's the coolest.
The first major turning point happened in 2020. Joe Rogan signs an exclusive licensing deal with Spotify, reportedly worth around $100 million. At the time, everybody understood why he took it. Who wouldn't? That's life-changing money. But this is where the first cracks started appearing. Because before Spotify, Rogan's platform felt untouchable. Anything could be discussed. Nothing was off limits. That freedom was the entire identity of the show. You could get a quantum physicist on one episode, a UFC fighter on the next, then Alex Jones screaming about interdimensional vampires 3 hours later. And people loved it because it felt real. It felt unpredictable. But once the Spotify deal happened, fans immediately noticed something different. Over 100 episodes quietly disappeared from his catalog. And these weren't random episodes nobody cared about. These were the controversial guests, conspiracy conversations, politically sensitive topics, and episodes Spotify likely viewed as risky. Now, regardless of whether Joe himself approved those removals, the perception damage was already done. Because Joe spent years criticizing censorship online. He constantly warned about YouTube censorship, social media suppression, demonetization, and corporations controlling speech. So when his own content suddenly vanished after joining a corporate giant, people saw him as a hypocrite. And this matters because Joe Rogan's audience wasn't built on celebrity status. It was built on trust. People trusted that he was independent. They trusted that he wasn't compromised. And once the audience started questioning that trust, well, that's when everything changes. The other problem is that Spotify fundamentally changed the feeling of the show. Before the deal, JRE felt underground. After the deal, it started feeling institutionalized. And ironically, the more powerful Joe became, the less relatable he started to feel.
The podcast is moving to Spotify. We're going to be working with the same crew, doing the exact same show. The only difference will be it will now be available on the largest audio platform in the world. Nothing else will change. It will be free. It will be free to you. You just have to go to Spotify to get it.
The second major turning point was Joe leaving LA and moving to Austin, Texas. Now, on paper, the decision made perfect sense. A lot of wealthy people are leaving California during that time because there's lower taxes, more freedom, less regulation. And during the pandemic, Rogan became extremely frustrated with lockdown policies in California. So, politically and financially, it made good sense. But culturally, that's where things changed drastically because people underestimate how important LA was to the success of the Joe Rogan Experience. LA gave Rogan access to everybody: actors, scientists, writers, musicians, athletes, comedians, executives. People were constantly flowing through LA. The city created endless opportunities for random, interesting conversations. Austin simply doesn't offer that same ecosystem. And after the move, fans slowly started noticing the guest pool becoming more repetitive. The show became less unpredictable, less diverse, more politically focused, more centered around comedians, culture war discussions, anti-woke conversations, and billionaire tech figures. And another thing changed also: the atmosphere around Rogan himself. In LA, he felt like part of a giant entertainment machine while still standing outside of it. But in Austin, Joe was the machine. He became the kingmaker, the center of the comedy scene, the guy everybody wanted approval from, and that changes people, whether intentionally or not. Then came the comedy mothership. Joe Rogan genuinely believed he was creating the future of stand-up comedy. And to be fair, the club became massively influential almost immediately. Huge comedians moved to Austin. New comics started orbiting around Rogan, and the Rogan sphere became its own comedy ecosystem. But critics started noticing something uncomfortable. A lot of the comedy scene suddenly revolved around anti-cancel culture material, anti-woke talking points, and comedians trying to prove how offensive they could be. Now, there's nothing wrong with edgy comedy. The problem is when being offensive becomes the punchline itself. And many comedians, even respected ones, started quietly criticizing Austin comedy for feeling more ideological than funny. Some comics described the mothership like a private club. Like if you weren't part of Rogan's inner circle, you were an outsider. And because Rogan's influence became so enormous, many comedians were scared to openly criticize him. Because appearing on JRE could completely change your career overnight. That kind of power creates an environment where people stop being honest. And once that happens, you create an echo chamber. Then came one of the biggest blows to Joe's reputation entirely: his 2024 comedy special. For years, fans tolerated Joe Rogan's stand-up career mostly because they liked him. But when he released a massive special after constantly talking about the art and science of comedy, people expected greatness, but instead, the response was brutal. And this is where a major problem surfaced.
He was explaining to me how this rocket ship his company designed is gonna move civilization to Mars. He's telling me all the calculations. Halfway through him explaining this, I stopped paying attention. I'm imagining 4 dudes strapped into a rocket on their way to Mars. Just one guy pulls out a gun, boom, shoots that guy, bang, shoots that guy, leaves one guy alive going, ah!
Joe Rogan may genuinely believe his podcast success translate directly into comedy greatness, but audiences don't necessarily agree. A huge percentage of fans realize something. They love Joe Rogan, the podcaster, not necessarily Joe Rogan, the comedian. And the internet absolutely roasted the special. People were criticizing the punchlines, forced delivery, yelling, Elon Musk glazing, and the lack of structure. Even worse, very few comedians publicly defended how funny it actually was. That silence, well, it speaks volumes. Because when your peers avoid praising the material, people notice. And after years of Rogan talking about comedy like it was a sacred art form mastered only by elite performers, the backlash became even harsher. The special damaged his credibility in a way many people weren't expecting. Now we get to another pretty big transformation: Joe Rogan becoming heavily political. For most of his career, Rogan occupied a strange middle ground politically. That's why so many different types of people watched him. He supported weed legalization, gay marriage, free speech, gun rights, psychedelics, skepticism towards corporations, also towards governments, and anti-war ideas. He didn't nearly fit into one political tribe. That unpredictability was part of his appeal because a lot of different types of people could relate to him. But over time, especially after COVID, the podcast became increasingly centered around political identity. And eventually, Joe stopped sounding politically homeless and started sounding politically aligned. Then came the Donald Trump interview. Now, there's nothing wrong with interviewing political figures. The issue many fans had was how Rogan handled the interview itself. People expected pushback, hard questions, and challenging the guest. Instead, many viewers felt that Trump received an incredibly comfortable platform. And when Rogan eventually endorsed Trump politically, that was the moment many fans realized that he was no longer the detached observer. He was now participating directly in political influence. And that changes how audiences interpret everything that you say afterward. And at the end of the day, endorsing a Republican Party is going to turn off 50% of your audience that are not into the Republican Party. Now, there's more criticism for Rogan, and we're talking about the whole billionaire problem. Specifically, his relationship with those billionaires. Old Rogan questioned powerful people. New Rogan often seems fascinated by them, especially tech billionaires. And the clearest example is his relationship with Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Zuckerberg, venture capital elites, and intelligence-connected tech figures. The Peter Thiel episode especially disturbed many longtime viewers, because Joe had the perfect opportunity to ask difficult questions about surveillance, government contracts, data collection, military technology, and intelligence operations. Instead, it was a soft conversation, very comfortable, with no pressure. And this is the exact opposite of what people originally loved about Joe Rogan. The old Joe would have challenged the authority, would have dropped those hard questions, wouldn't have tried to make his guest feel excessively comfortable, but instead asked the questions that would have made them uncomfortable. The new Joe often sounds protective of authority, as long as the authority figure is someone he admires personally. And that's a really big shift. The audience notices inconsistencies fast, especially while Rogan criticizes elites broadly while simultaneously debriefing some of the most powerful billionaires on earth.
You ever see that interview where Peter Thiel, they ask him, should the human race survive? And he has like this long pause. It's like, it's a really funny pause. Because if you know Peter, he's a brilliant man, and Peter carefully considers everything before he answers it.
Now, we know that Rogan used to be big into conspiracy theories, but he now treats these topics very differently. Back in the day, the old Joe Rogan would question everything, entertain wild ideas, challenge official narratives, and encourage curiosity. But modern, current-day Rogan often shuts those conversations down immediately, especially during topics involving powerful institutions, and longtime fans find it weird. Because this is the same guy who spent years discussing UFOs, JFK, government corruption, intelligence agencies, big pharma, and elite networks. But now, he often sounds dismissive whenever conversations move too close to the uncomfortable territory. And critiques argue that this makes him resemble mainstream media more than the outsider that he was in his earlier days. Now, Joe Rogan is obsessed with AI. This is where some fans genuinely started feeling uncomfortable, because Joe increasingly talks about AI like it's inevitable, superior to humans, spiritually significant, and even godlike. At times, he literally compares AI to the return of Jesus Christ. And what scares people isn't just the fascination itself, it's the lack of skepticism. This is the guy who built a career questioning everything, but when it comes to AI, he often sounds completely trusting of the billionaires building it. The contradiction stands out heavy, and it actually has to make you ask the question, why isn't he questioning this more? Why isn't he more concerned or looking to find out more information about it and being so trusting in the first place?
Hey God, could you put that into our love and sponsor perplexity?
It's also weird when Rogan gets fooled by obvious AI content online while simultaneously defending AI as a hyper-intelligent truth machine.
Did you see what they just did to the guys that won the Super Bowl? You see the jock tax?
Yeah.
Jamie, you see the jock tax?
Yeah, it's not a new thing, though.
I understand.
not?
It's specific to California.
Yeah,
and
but
this jock tax in California, some of the players lost money playing in the Super Bowl.
That's not
They had to
true.
pay. Oh, no, it is true.
I don't think so.
No, it is true. I went it through AI last night.
I don't.
No, it was in. They pulled it up on Grok,
I know.
and people analyzed it, and it's based. No, Jamie. It's Jamie.
Now, we've all seen things online that are AI, and you don't realize it, and you're like, oh, snap, that's actually not real in the first place. But if you're coming across as an expert in that, you'd probably have a better understanding, or at least you should. Even Jamie, the longtime producer famous for fact-checking the show, now gets overridden by AI tools constantly. And many fans feel like Rogan's relationship with technology has become almost ideological. Like he's emotionally invested in believing the future belongs to AI no matter what the consequences. Now let's be honest here. Joe Rogan is still one of the biggest podcasts and still a very enjoyable show. He was at #1 for a very long time, and I believe that he's dropped himself down to #6 at this point in time, which is still a great show. He's still massively successful, but something definitely shifted. And the numbers are reflecting that. Many longtime viewers simply don't feel the same excitement anymore. Why? Because the old magic was authentic, and that authenticity is no longer here. Back then, it felt like a curious guy asking honest questions without caring who was uncomfortable. Now, though, the show often feels politically calculated, celebrity-heavy, billionaire-friendly, AI-obsessed, and ideologically repetitive. The mysteries disappeared. And once the audiences feel like they can predict you, you lose part of what made you compelling in the first place. What made Joe Rogan special was never the perfection. It was the curiosity. It was his interest in every single guest that he had on his show and the unpredictability of each of those guests. People didn't watch because Joe had all the answers. They watched because Joe seemed like he was genuinely interested in finding those answers. But over time, many fans believe Joe stopped questioning power and started socializing with it, stopped challenging narratives and started defending them, stopped distrusting elites and started admiring them. And maybe the craziest part of all is that Joe Rogan once warned everyone this exact thing could happen to media figures. Power changes people. Influence changes people, money changes people, and now millions of people believe they watched it happen to him in real time. And whether you agree with it or not, which I'm genuinely curious if you do, let me know in the comments below, there's one thing that's undeniable. The Joe Rogan experience today feels very different from the podcast people originally fell in love with. And honestly, that might be the biggest reason why so many longtime fans have quietly walked away.